You're not failing, as long as you're learning. There is no such thing as failure as long as you learn from it and don't repeat it.
Welcome to Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches, where we discuss all aspects of parenting using the foundation of understanding personality dynamics to raise independent, responsible, and resilient children. My name is Karen Wagner, founder of Teaching Our Youth and the Parenting Blueprint. Let's dig right in with today's topic and have some real talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches.
Welcome back to another episode of the Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches. Joined today by myself, Janet, and
Mindy Green.
Yes, and today, brace yourselves, listeners, because today we're going to talk about something that may make the hair on the back of your neck a little uncomfortable. So let's, without further ado, what comes to mind when I say the word failure?
Ooh, that's a good one, isn't it?
Right?
Yes.
It's like right. We have like an exhale. It's an exhale. It's just like, it just makes us like, no. What were you thinking when I said that?
Well, it's interesting because, and probably our listeners out there too, I have a very physical response to some words. And so that's one of those words. I felt my chest tighten and I was like, ooh, and I know where we're going with this. So I can imagine as the audience is listening, they're like, oh, okay, where are you going? So yes. So if you're feeling that tension in your chest, just breathe, exhale, and then it's all good. We're going to really dive into this topic today and give you maybe a little bit of a different perspective on it too.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll do that in the short time that we have. And when we're done, hopefully you'll be left with, I like that. I can work on no longer being intimidated by that word, or to your point, Mindy, having that visceral reaction to the word failure. And I believe, we should probably at least call to the carpet. Failure has morphed a little bit, like when you and I were growing up, and I know I'm older than you are by a number of years, but like it really wasn't, like it was way more common, right? It didn't have such a derogatory implication, right? It was like, get yourself pick yourself up by the bootstraps. And that's how we grew up. But today, pretty different.
Well, and I think that part of it too, it seems like there's I'm going to use an example of a pressure cooker, or the Instapots now. And so, which I'm going to admit that I'm a little bit scared of because I've,
I don't even own one. How's that?
yes. So, but it's just that pressure cooker that I think that we find ourselves in now. It seems like the stakes, or it feels that way sometimes for parents, for our kids, that the stakes are higher. And so I think that adds to some of that, the angst that goes with even thinking about failure.
And is it wrapped up in the stories that we tell ourselves? Or like, if we go back, like, what does it actually mean? What does failure actually mean? Which could be really personal to each individual. That was redundant, but you know where I was going with that. Like, do you have like your personal definition? I know I'm thinking of one for myself.
Yeah, when I think about failure, I think that whatever I did didn't work out the way that I thought it was going to.
Right. Right. As simple as that, right? You could be making boxed brownies and misread or forget them in the oven and they burn, and that's a failure, right? Okay. Is it a failure? What is a failure? To your point, the expected outcome didn't occur. You had an idea of where it was going and it didn't happen. Like, big
Right.
deal, right? Like if we're talking about brownies, big deal. If you're talking about a cross-country road trip, okay, that might feel a little bit more monumental, but in the grander scheme of things, if you show up and there was no accident and all of that, like you ran out of gas or whatever it is it a failure? Like, why is it so negative when all it really means is that your plan didn't work out the way you expected it to, or you planned it to, or something happened and you just didn't like, when did it become such a bad word?
Yeah. And that is really something to think about and consider. And for the parents out there who are listening to this, maybe you can answer that for yourselves. Like, did you feel a shift in the way that you view failure? And do you see a difference in the way that you maybe view failure with your kids than maybe your parents did with you? Because I think sometimes we do bring into our own parenting how we were raised and the lessons that we brought with us through that. And it can impact our parenting for the good or for negatively as well.
I just thought of something, and I don't mean to throw the conversation, but is that for anybody that follows me personally on socials, I'm on a kick right now about words that I think should not be used. Like, and it just came to me, it's like, how are our parents, not how, are parents even using the word within their homes? And if so, how does that come up?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when we think about the power of words, like that sounds like one that we probably, unless we redefine it within your family, like it shouldn't even be used. Like there's that, because there is really no such thing as failure as long as you learn from the episode, the behavior, the activity, whatever it is that didn't work out. Case in point, the brownies. If you left the brownies in the oven and they burnt, okay, you're not going to have brownies for dessert, but did you learn something? Yeah, I'm going to set a timer for myself and go check. I'm going to set my watch because lots of people have those watches that they can set a timer. I'm going to only do this. I'm going to stand in the kitchen and stare at the clock, like something to accommodate so that it never happens again.
Absolutely. You
Or is
take
that
the little nuggets that you learn from that to make changes for the next time.
Yeah, so you're not failing, you're as long as you're learning. There is no such thing as failure as long as you learn from it and don't repeat it.
Well, and I think too that sometimes it seems like it's very black and white, that success and failure are opposites, rather than seeing failure as part of the process of being successful. Because it's that trial and error. It's like you said with the brownies. It's like they may have failed miserably that that time that you tried to make it, and maybe you switched an ingredient or you had them in too long or you had them at the wrong temperature or whatever. But then when you go back and you can assess that, you're like, oh, wait a minute. These are the things that I didn't do right. And these are the things that I can do next time. And so I think there's something so valuable in seeing that as a learning opportunity rather than, that it's something that you're never going to do again either.
And I think you brought up an excellent point in that success is not the opposite of failure. Like it's not one or the other. Like we could say that, and I mean, I love this statement, right? Like you're not failing as long as you're learning. But it's not success versus failure. It's learning, like standing all by itself. As long as you're learning, there is no failure. There can be no failure. That's a bold statement. There can be no failure if there's learning involved. The episode, the behavior, the project may not have turned out the way you wanted it to, but it's still not a failure.
And I think too, along with that, I've heard recently, and this is something that I've seen a lot of people talking about, is failing forward.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to your point that, failing forward means that you haven't, because sometimes we think failing means that you have been knocked back down to like ground zero. And, rather than thinking of it as, okay, so you did something and you're still in the same spot, or you might be even further ahead because you're taking the lessons or the things that you learned from that experience to help you do it differently or better, or do something different altogether the next time you try it.
So what did you call it? Failing forward?
Failing forward. I've been seeing that recently
Another way
quite a
of
bit.
saying what we're saying, right? It's another,
Exactly.
okay. Okay, yeah,
hmm
that's fair. So everybody can leave this episode with at least a reframe of failing forward. That's fair. That's easy to digest, and I think that's easy to internalize and then share with our kiddos. Uh, so in honor of the different personality styles, and I think we're speculating based on what we understand of the different personality styles. If we were to run through them quickly, so the D, we've got our high dominant kids or our dominant kids. How do they deal with failure? More easily, or are they the ones that are stricken with, ah! I'm asking. I don't.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm thinking about that a little bit too. And I really see the D's because they are very task oriented, and they like their checklists, they like to, and they're very driven when it comes to doing things well. I think that that's where some perfectionistic tendencies could come into play. And I have a child who's a high D. And so I would just say that knowing the way that she approaches things, that she has a difficult time when she doesn't do things as well as she thinks that she should. And I'm saying should as in, with air quotes around that, because those are her own expectations.
Sure. Okay. That's totally fair. I'm in 100% agreement on that. For our inspiring kids,
I
thoughts?
kind I kind of think of them as they take a licking and keep on ticking. The old commercial for, what was it, Timex or something, or whatever.
Dates
There
us.
was
That
there
dates
was
us.
I'm dating myself, but for the for whatever commercial it was. And I think about that, like for those kids, that they're, it's like they bounce off of something and then they go to the next
Well, they're the
direction. And
possibility, like they're the seekers of
yeah,
possibility. They entertain all of the different possibilities. So for them, it'll be like, okay, maybe that didn't work out. They'll beat themselves up, but they will recover quickly. And then next time they've already got the next plan in place. All right, our S supportive kids.
I tend to
These
think
are
of,
generalizations for
yes.
that are listening. These are just generalizations, but things to look out for when you understand the personality type of your own child. Just know that this might be an indication of something that they're feeling in response to uh, failing forward. I used it too. Okay, back to S.
So S's, I think, are really the ones who they're the sensitive ones, and not that the other personality types are not sensitive, but I think because they're so relationship oriented that sometimes they can take these things to heart and feel like they haven't done what they needed to do, and that they're maybe letting someone else down. So those are some things to be aware of when you have an S type personality, either yourself or for your kids.
Yeah, you're more you're more interested in how did what you did affect the community, the group, others.
Mhm.
So it's not as internal, self-focused. Okay. And last but not C, our high C kids.
High Cs, again, I can think that they're really about again, very much like the dominant, like looking to check the things off their list. And so they could see that as maybe that really reflecting on maybe what they did or didn't do.
More reflective.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we leave our listeners with a takeaway, a couple of takeaways actually, in a short period of time, get very comfortable or become more aware how you process, perceive, internalize failure for yourself. Maybe take a gander at your kids' personalities and how they may view whether it's poor grades or not coming in first in their athleticism, or maybe if they're in school and like they were in the play, like they may have flubbed a line or something and they want to go down the rabbit hole of something like that. We need to be prepared to not intervene, hold space. I mean, I know that sounds a little woo-woo, but like our kids are going to respond. It's our job. Like they're going to mirror our response. So how we respond to failure is just as important as how they organically want to respond to failure.
I think too that it's important, and this goes along with this, not to feel like we have to fix whatever
Right.
they're feeling, because that's part of who they are, that's part of their personality. And when they're able to, calm down and be open to talking, that's where we can bring in some of those other perspectives, and not to push them off on them, but just to give them some things to consider, as they're talking through whatever happened, letting them know that, a temporary failure doesn't mean that they're not ever going to be proficient at something, or, that they'll always have this struggle, so saying not yet is a really good one. And I know, Janet, you talk about that a
I love
lot.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so, you didn't figure this out yet. And also
Really.
normalizing the failures, that's part of this process of learning. And I think that that's that failing forward. And also then just praising the effort, letting them know that, whenever they make an effort, not to say that we have to like give them unreserved and over the top praise, but just letting them know that, what, they showed up and they tried, and that's worth something. It's meaningful.
Yeah. Love everything. And we could go on, like this could be an hour-long discussion. So our objective for the listeners is to just be a conversation starter. Like this is clearly the Cliff's Notes version of this conversation. But again, just give it some thought for yourself. If you have any questions, we're always happy to respond in comment. So we'll put the link below on how to reach us. You and I talked earlier, I was laughing because I had actually done a chapter in my book on failure. You know what I named it? Failure is a necessary option. That's the
Hmm.
chapter name. So my chapters are very, very short. I wrote a very short little Cliff's Note book. If anybody is interested in that, chapter 12 on failure, just drop us a line below. I'll put my email down below and we'll just send you a digital version of that just to give you something to think about, not to put failure on a shelf and have it be a taboo. Embrace it, enjoy it.
Yes. And as one of the local churches in our area says, it's like it's just a thought, not a sermon. So that's what this podcast today is all about, just getting you to think about like how do you approach failure? How, and just observing how your kids look at it too. And just, is there some room for some changes and some growth there?
Perfect. All right, take us home, Mindy.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode of Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches. If you have questions, as Janet had said earlier, please drop them in the comments below. Like, subscribe, follow, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Bye for now.
Bye.